Well, good morning, everyone. My name is David Van Zandt. I'd like to welcome you here to the New School. I am president of the New School, and I must commend you for coming out on this, what is going to turn out probably to be a very snowy day, although it's already started out there. But I think this is wonderful that you could make it here, because this is going to be a great conference. It's going to explore the religious life and sustainable environments in the Himalayas. And it's going to look at a number of the theoretically rich questions around that issue, and also wrestle with the larger question of sustainability. This is really the kind of program that the New School likes to put on. Our core principles of creativity and social engagement, particularly both locally and globally, are illustrated in this conference, and also connecting scholars from all around the world. And I'd like to start out by offering a special welcome to our guests who have traveled from all over the world, including China, India, Nepal, Europe, and other areas. And I also think we do have some people watching online. Good, so welcome to all of you who are attending the conference online. Thank you also very much to the Henry Luce Foundation, who's generously supported this conference. This is part of a 3-year initiative on everyday religion and sustainable environments. And we're really grateful to the foundation for sharing our commitment to interdisciplinary and cutting-edge scholarship. I'd also like to thank our other co-sponsors, our partners in this, the Association of Nepal and Himalayan Studies. And of course, this has been organized in conjunction with Yale University, where I understand many of you are going in the next couple of days to continue the conference. Finally, I'd like to thank and congratulate Ashok Gurung, who has worked very hard through his leadership and in both many other important events at our India-China Center. He's really made it a presence in the academic world. This event was made possible through the collaboration and support of several other university programs and divisions here at the New School, including the Religious Studies program at Lang, the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management program, and our Tishman Environment and Design Center. And it's really wonderful to see so much collaboration, not only between people from outside of the New School, but also between people within this New School. Finally, I understand this is an initial. This is the initial 3-year phase of the project that was so important, not just in terms of research, but also here at the New School for curriculum development. There have been a number of new courses designed and taught by our faculty members, including Mark Larimore, Sarah Winter, and Georgina Drew. And these courses have encouraged our students to develop intellectually and critically engage some of the key questions the project explores. And I understand from Ashok there's also some plans to enter into a second phase of the project and to bring more academics and policymakers into closer discussion on these important themes. I wish everyone a pleasant day. Put your snowshoes on, get out there, but enjoy it while you're here, and I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful time. Ashok?
Thank you, David. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ashok Gurung. I'm the director of India-China Institute. It's good to see many old friends and welcome new friends to join us. I'm grateful to many of you could make it today, particularly, as David said, those who are traveling from India, Nepal, China, and Europe. Before we get started, I want to give a special thanks to Toby Workman, who we gratefully acknowledge for working with us through the Henry Luce Foundation. Toby, you have been a great friend and ally from the outset, having foreseen the importance of our inquiry and given us the trust necessary to allow us and to follow through with it. It's fair to say that this is a rare quality, sympathizing with the uncertainty involved in the intellectual exploration of this nature. I also want to express my gratitude to colleagues at Yale University, Andrea Quintman and Sarah Snyderman, who couldn't be here, but she's getting ready for us. And of course, many colleagues at the New School that are collaborating with us. It's always a pleasure to organize projects such as this at the new school because the university is so receptive to thinking outside the box and in a critical way. The reason I use phrase outside the box when speaking of the new school, unlike many projects supported by traditional grant-making organizations, this project not only followed the standard stipulation that the outcomes of the projects are predetermined. Both the New School and the Henry Luce Foundation allowed us enough latitude to explore what the defining factors in the region are and what emerges from bringing together people from different backgrounds, especially different disciplinary backgrounds. This was a novelty, and we are eternally grateful to have received such support for this mode of research and collaboration. Having said this, I'm mindful of the importance of deliverables. One of the key things that emerged through 3 years of formal and informal conversations in India, China, Nepal, and New York City was the creation of a new community of scholars and experts, around 70 of them, based inside and outside of the Himalaya. This is not a closed group of scholars, but rather an open and interdisciplinary community that investigates the intersection and interplay of everyday religion and sustainable environments. This community and its conversations will survive beyond the life of this project, and hopefully with your support and engagement. The idea of this initiative began with two considerations. The first was India-China Institute's recognition that though the individuals and institutions based in power centers like Delhi and Beijing are important, to better understand India and China, we would have to understand the country's margins. As you will agree with me, Himalaya is no ordinary margin. The Himalaya is a region with not only amazing biodiversity, but also rich array of cultural forms and ways of life. This is a region through which some of the world's major rivers flow and upon which more than 1 billion lives depend. It is also a region where climate change is becoming very apparent, and this will increasingly affect people in and outside of the Himalaya. For instance, those living in Bangladesh and all the way in Pearl River Delta will soon see themselves as linked with the changes happening in the Himalaya. The second consideration was the importance of interplay between religion and environment in this region. I'm not a scholar of religious studies as such, but being from that region and having spent significant amount of time in the Indian, Chinese, and Tibetan areas of the Himalaya, I'm interested in how religious synchronism shapes people's worldview and how these ideas play a role in the way people envision and live in their respective environments in that part of the world. A wider recognition of the importance of studies in this region and the integration of everyday religion and sustainable environments is already becoming a reality. We have perpetuated this, as our president said, at the New School, where our colleagues Mark Larrymore and Georgina Drew began teaching new courses. And since the initiative began, we have seen many other universities are now wrestling with the creation of new courses. As I alluded to earlier, this has been truly a collaborative initiative. Here at the New School with India, China, Nepal, Pakistan, and Bhutan. I cannot possibly name all of the participants over the past 3 years. There have been so many individuals and institutions who aided us and pushed us on. That said, I would like to thank in particular Professor Cameron Tonkinwise, right there, who was at the New School, and he's here with us today. And I would also like to thank my colleague, Mark Larrymore. He's the Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Eugene Lang College and a philosopher of the highest order. When this initiative began, Mark had never been to the Himalaya. Watching him engage in this project over the past 3 years has reaffirmed my faith in the idea of engaged scholarship. I want to recognize Georgina Drew as well. She joined India-China Institute as a postdoc fellow. 1 year into the project, and alongside her own research, has been central to day-to-day coordination and design of the project as a whole. She is a quintessential scholar in action with tremendous energy and fervor. She is ICI's first postdoc fellow and will end her term with us on June 30th, but then she will move to Adelaide on a payroll to accept a tenure-track position as an assistant professor of anthropology and development studies. We're happy to have played a small part in the progress of our work which I'm certain will continue to be an important contribution to the field, and we look forward to hearing her from down under. This initiative also involves a logistical support crew to help secure visas, housing, transportation, produce reports, design posters, curate our website, and countless other tasks. So thank you all to the entire ICI team. Can you please stand, ICI team? And most of these are graduate and undergraduate students at the new school. Special thank you to Grace Ho, ICI office manager. Where is Grace? Say something. Grace is responsible for holding down the fort and making sure a multitude of elements come together. So I'm really thankful to her. To help orient you to the conference program we have planned, I want to highlight some of its key elements. This event will first and foremost feature work based on the ongoing research we at ICI have conducted in China, India, and Nepal. It will also feature the parallel research of independent scholars who will present articles on the work they have carried out in similar locations in the Himalaya. With all these contributions, the event will provide significant context to discuss the methodological and theoretical problematics of researching everyday religion and sustainability in the Himalaya, as well as the field's policy applications and wider relevance. I've enjoyed reading over 14 papers dealing with this subject, and those papers will be shared over the next 2 days. Following revisions, these papers will be proposed for publication in a special issue of the journal Himalaya, and hopefully also an issue of Journal for Study of Religion, Nature, and Culture. Because of time limitations, I will thank panelists in advance for sticking to their time allocations and keeping the whole program in sync. Finally, I also have the special opportunity to thank President of the New School, David Van Jen, who has been a steadfast supporter and advisor to ICI. I'm grateful to you, sir. Following today's first session, there will be a lunch at noon, which I welcome you all to join us at. Last but not least, as David mentioned, I would like to remind everyone that this conference is being broadcast live. So welcome to those connected via the internet, especially those professors who have invited their students to join us. As a reminder, everyone, including our virtual audience, is invited to participate in the Q&A sessions throughout this conference. Last but not the least, I also want to briefly mention another exciting initiative at the ICI which may be interest to especially those who are from the new school. It's called Economies and Societies Initiative. This project will be led by our two new academic co-directors, Mark Fraser, Mark please, and Sanjay Reddy. Is Sanjay here? He will be here soon. So these are the two new academic directors. Although just beginning, this project has already led some exciting conversations. As part of this, we're excited to announce the two new funding opportunities, one for faculty research grants and another for student research papers, looking at the issue of economies and societies in India and China. I think this complements the Everyday Religion and Sustainable Environments project very well. So on that note, I would like to now invite my friend Toby Wokman, please.
Thank you, Ashok. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here this morning. Both personally and professionally, this conference brings together multiple strands in my own life, from old graduate student friends who are here, to 2 years I spent at the New School in the provost office, 2004, 2005, which were the years when ICI, I guess you call it now. So I still call it EC. The India-China Institute was first imagined and then launched. And perhaps most importantly, when Ashok Gurung was recruited to be its founding director. It's been really wonderful to see the Institute grow over these years under Ashok's inspired leadership and to become such a vibrant and really unusual institution. 4 years ago, I joined the Henry Luce Foundation to direct an initiative called Religion and International Affairs, which coincidentally was launched in the same year as ICI, 2005. This initiative was designed to better inform US policymakers in particular, but to some extent the public more broadly, about the very complex roles of religion in world affairs. And it does this in a number of different ways. First, by supporting interdisciplinary research and scholarship, and by bringing scholars into active conversation with policymakers and practitioners of various sorts, whether they be journalists or leaders of NGOs or people in religious communities themselves. And finally, by creating new intellectual resources and new networks. This incredible network that Ashok alludes to of people, 70 or people all over the region is the kind of thing that we only anticipated when we began. Now in its 9th year, the initiative has made close to 80 grants. I actually hadn't counted them up until the other day when I was thinking about this, and I was sort of amazed. Initially, we focused on graduate schools of public policy and international affairs, and more recently on a wider range of research universities, media organizations, and policy institutions. The focus of the projects has also ranged very widely: politics of religious freedom, gender and human rights, religion and violence, and many more. If you're interested, I invite you to look at the Luce Foundation website. You'll find a complete list of all 80. But I think it's interesting, the New School project is distinctive in that it's actually the only one that focuses on religion and the environment. This is something perhaps will change. A word about collaboration, as Ashok emphasized, this project is also a really remarkable example, I think, of how international collaborations can work and be productive. It's an example of the attempt to cross disciplinary lines, and then perhaps most challenging, really, and it's something that this initiative continues to grapple with, is how to bridge those gulfs between scholarship and public policy and practice. So I think by the end of the day tomorrow, it will be quite interesting to see how those discussions come together. Just one comment, and then I'll close. I was really lucky, privileged last year to attend one of the project's workshops in Shangri-la with some of you, and in a truly unbelievably beautiful setting, to hear some of the lively discussions that took place, and I anticipate will take place in the next 2 days. So thank you, Ashok, for inviting me both to Shangri-La and to this conference. And also thanks for engaging the foundation as you've done along the way. I'm really happy 2 of my colleagues are here. Li Ling, who is somewhere from the Asia program, and in the back from the Luce Scholars, and Helena Kalenda, who directs the Asia program, will join us at lunch and in the afternoon. And we all appreciate the hard work and creativity that has gone into the initiative as a whole and this really extraordinary gathering today. So thank you.
Well, now I would like to invite the chair of the first session, Mark Turin. Mark Turin is the program director of the Yale Himalaya Initiative at Yale University. He's an anthropologist, linguist, man of many, many talents. Someone who really knows Himalayas inside out. And I think here I just want to remind that everyone's bios are in the program that you have. So I won't go into detail, but I'm really delighted that Mark has agreed to chair this session. So it's to you.
Great. It's a bit lonely at the top. What a pleasure. What a pleasure to be here, and an honor also to be the first chair. I think my job is rather more timekeeping and whipping than it is substantive right now. But I am delighted to have this opportunity also to say, as Ashok mentioned in his introductory remarks, that we're hoping to see some of these wonderful discussions and papers continue in the journal Himalaya, which I've now accepted the editorship of with Sienna Craig, a colleague at Dartmouth. So to that end, and since we're already slightly behind schedule, this being extendable time here in the New School, I would like to welcome the first speakers and presenters up to the podium, please. Mukta Singh Lama and Laxmi Shova Shakya. And I think, will you be presenting a PowerPoint presentation or only speaking? Speaking. Then I think we might also invite our other colleagues, Libo, Mahendra Lama, and Roshan Rai, please.
Mark, how are you?
Good to... Okay.
Oh, Libo is.
Pencil. Excellent. Excellent. So our first paper is by Mukta Singh Lama, who is Professor of Sociology and Anthropology at Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu, and Laxmi Shova Shakya, Research Fellow of the Harka Gurung Research Fellowship in Nepal. Mukta.
Thank you, Mark. And good morning, namaste.
Hold on. Hold on.
Good morning and namaste, everybody. It's a great privilege to be first one to greet you and offer our greetings. But also, it's a little bit situation that I feel nervous. The thing that we are presenting to you today is work in progress that we are doing as a part of the research project on everyday religion and sustainable environment in the Himalayas that we conducted in Kathmandu Valley. Four of us were involved in this project. Two colleagues, Siddhartha Basnet and Navaraj Lama, both of them are back in Kathmandu, and Shova and myself are very happy to be here with you. This is work in progress, as I mentioned. What we wanted to do is to present you some of the preliminary findings of our research, based on the work that we did in 2012, trying to look at how ordinary people view and practice religion in everyday life. Structurally, I wanted to present how everyday religion is being, practiced in Kathmandu, some of the points, and then see the link with the water, how water works as a connector between religion and environment and various other domains of social realm, including politics and development and life and death and so forth. I thought of beginning with a poem, a stanza from a poem by poet Bikram Subba, because I thought that it sort of gives a current situation of change and also dilemmas that people in Kathmandu is facing. The poem reads like this: the Vishnu and Garuda who fed on fresh spring water on organic fruits now live day by day with sugar water and fast food. Wearing ancient gajura among the deserted trees, dismayed Dolagiri keeps looking on at the valley. When I asked the poet Bikram Subba He says this poem is based on his reflection of 32 years of living in Kathmandu. This was also a part of the group, as a part of the group of artists who were asked to offer their perspectives on redefining Kathmandu Valley. Dolagiri is the name of the hill where famous Sangundaran temple stands in the northeast of Kathmandu Valley, which looks at the valley. And then I briefly discuss, the background, where Kathmandu Valley is, and so forth, which I'll not go in detail right now. I thought maybe we can engage a little bit on the concept of Jomia that James Scott, forwarded. Taking Himalaya also as like entity that has a lot of similarities, and and mark, because of its features that mark it off from adjacent areas. But I also thought that it's a little bit difficult because Himalaya, the feature of the Himalaya is also not only of the similarity, but a diversity itself is the most important feature of Himalayas. And then I looked at the little bit of process of the history of urbanization. Right from like end of the first millennium, 1080, after arrival of the Mallas from the south who rule indigenous Newars in Kathmandu Valley, we see 3-story buildings densely clustered around courtyards and public squares called Baha. So Kathmandu Valley is one of the urban civilizations that went on, one like in Srinagar. And during the Rana period, after 1846, when this family aristocratic rule came in, they fashioned Kathmandu Valley to become like a Banaras, and so a lot of construction work went on in Bagmati River to look, just like Kashi, and a lot of Hindu religion came into focus. And then I talked about how Kathmandu resembles Asian cities, other Asian cities caught between tradition and modernity. With the process of globalization, Kathmandu defies early images of Himalayan region as that of isolation, remoteness, and other mountain specificity, if not vulnerability, fragility, and that of the Himalayan crisis. These are the features that I got from Isimo's work, the features of the Himalayan. And I thought that many of the features that work out in 1970s and 80s have changed now because of the access to mobile phones and transportation and so forth. So Himalaya is not anymore looks like very isolated place, but within the process of globalization, what we call. So as a method, our primary work was on life history. We talked with 15 people who kindly shared their stories with us and offered friendship with. So we generate our learning from these stories, besides our own participant observations and other interviews. A brief introduction of these important people I thought maybe would be relevant. We conducted this research in 3 places in Kathmandu. One is in Bauda, the other one is in Patan, the old city, part of the old city, and then Pasupati, where famous Hindu temple exists. 3 women were from Patan, who have 3 distinct life trajectories. The first woman that we named Lily has recently joined Brahma Kumari sect of Hinduism as a way to solace to her long life of shocks and surprises. The second one forms a vernacular form of Hindu practices in her day-to-day life and is living currently as widow. The third is elderly women in her 70s who offer her services to people distributing drinking water in one of the bahas. Among men, one belonged to Pode community. Pode is a former untouchable person situated at the bottom of caste hierarchy, Newar caste hierarchy in Patan. The other one is a Hindu Newar who immersed himself to Buddhism and Vipassana meditation and lives in one of the squatter settlement. The last one in Patan is Hari, who lives as a wage laborer since he arrived in Kathmandu and recently become Christian. So the other side in Bauddha, we had elderly women, we call her Mendo, which means flower, arrived in Lokhel after her marriage from Natal village in northwestern Nepal from a farming community. She has a long saga of struggle and pains in her life with personal tragedies and has taken faith and devotion to Dharma as a way out. It's primarily because of that she moved to Bauddha so that she can be near to Bauddha Stupa. The other woman, Putali, currently decided to become a nun in Buddhist monastery. After long, social life of ups and downs, she was sent to work as a servant in one of the palaces when she was 14 years old, where she was required to sing bhajans and Hindu religious hymns and follow strict rules of commensality. After death of her royal mistress, she married with a man who also worked in a similar job. Finally, 2 years ago, she decided to devote her life as a nun in one of the monasteries in Kathmandu. Another man, on the hand, comes from a humble background, but went to a Buddhist school and also served as a priest in local community. Not in a high rank, but as a person who would provide counseling services to the families. Similarly, other man that we worked has a status of being a very good orator and also advisor to the people who are suffering from various illnesses and so forth. And the other two person in Pasupati area is one of the person who came there as aspiring priest for the temple but was not successful. And another one is the young man who organize youth against the caste system and caste practices. So these are the kind of people that we work with. We learn their stories, and based on that, we try to get ideas what everyday religion for the ordinary people mean, and then looking at the water connections. What is everyday religion for the people like them in Kathmandu Valley? One theme that emerged very clearly in our discussion is that, following caste practices, caste-based practices, is by and large even today considered as practicing everyday religion, because in Nepal a particular history of from 1850s, Nepali state actually reinforced the caste practices as the legal rule. So after the practice of more than 100 years, people have really internalized both so-called untouchable, so-called former lower caste and the high caste as well, including some of the indigenous communities that is believed to have outside the caste system. So we have got the examples of why we say this. And the second point is, like the life of Mendo and other people would demonstrate that devotion to faith, a particular religion, is a way of becoming religious. That's another point that we wanted to make here. Another point is religion in service of the practical. That by this, what we mean is that people have shifted their religious faiths from Orthodox Hindu to Brahma Kumari or Vipassana or Sai Baba and so forth, and people becoming Christian and so forth. It's practically they looked at they came through a sort of difficult situation in their life, and then they look for the way out, and then they find support in this kind of situation. Another point that we thought was making dana or making charity is conceived by ordinary people as one of the way of becoming religion. There are a lot of ways how one can provide dana and charity. And other point is that connecting ancestors and producing society, which means to be people who we have met, they would during the early calendar, they would perform particular rituals to appease their ancestors, and also coming together in various kind of rituals so that society become possible. The interactions and so forth is they have this rituals that combine people together. And lastly, living and producing religious geography. When we look at the people and their beliefs in religion, it's also, you have to look at this in a particular territory where they have gods and goddesses, and how these gods and goddesses are protecting the territory, and also constantly producing culturalized and religious geography for the people to make sense of their living in a particular location. And I come to I have 2 minutes. I have a few points in water connections. When we look at the environment in Kathmandu Valley, we see a fast deterioration of the agricultural land. It went up to from 80% of agriculture in 1970 to now it came to 30% only agricultural land. Together with that, forest has declined, and then livestock raising has come down, and so forth. And so the life has, materially become comfortable, because people don't have to go to collecting firewood anymore in the forest. Now they can have a LGP gas for cooking, and water is in the kitchen, and so forth. But there's also a sense of something missed. It's a kind of inside sort of discomfort that people carry around. The situation for water is same, because water has vanished very fast. But when we look at the uses of water, it's a very interesting, because it has a multiple uses. It requires every one of the 15 persons that we talk with, they start their day with cleaning and purifying their body. It's beyond the personal hygiene and health, I would say, because the softness of water, what is the source of water, temperature, how it is discharged, and all this feeling that you gain with the feeling and touching with water is very important for these people. They start with offering water to the god and goddesses that they believe. They needed Choko Pani, clear, pure water for offering them, and then when they start various rituals, we'll come up with some of the slides for you with the water purification, the death, the person when a person dies, then you have to bid last farewell with the water and so forth. Well, I'm also talking here that looking at the distribution of water, you can also see the class distinction. Who have what kind of class in the society? Last point. In Anthropology, a recent article by Ben Orlob and Stephen Catton suggested that anthropological inquiries can look at the various forms of valuing water, using water, and so forth. Particularly, I found it interesting because they proposed that the water be studied as total social fact, following Marcel Mauss. Mauss wrote on gift exchange, in which all kinds of institutions are given expression at one and the same time: religious, juridical, and moral, which relate to both politics and the family, likewise economic ones. So anthropological study looking at water is also similar. Water combines all aspects of life and all domains of social realm, including the religion and so forth. I'll stop here and go for slideshow.
Thank you so very much, Mukta and Shova, for this very interesting contribution on the fast-changing context of Kathmandu and the emergence of what we might call everyday water. Thanks also to Navraj and to Siddhartha, whose contribution shines through in this paper. We have a few minutes for questions. Kathy?
I was intrigued when you said that your informants all clearly understood caste-based practices as being an expression of religion, in particular Hindu religion. Because, of course, in political discourse as well as in some academic discourse, a number of people try to separate caste from Hindu religion. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about what people thought about it.
Yeah, you're right. Mostly of the different life histories that we have got, mainly from the lower caste, it comes very, very clearly that, following the caste practices is a way of, like, especially for the older lower caste person is like that. But also for the higher caste people belonging to the habitus is something very strong, looks like. When we extend this to like other groups like Tamang and Raids and others, although they themselves do not have a very strict sense of caste practices, but in interaction with the lower caste people, because of the, I would say, long history, legal history of Kathmandu, that kind of reinforces this idea that religion is about following the caste practices. I think that also exists. So it's a differing degree, but I thought that was one aspect.
In the interest of time, I think it's best that we probably keep all the questions in discussion until the end, but if there are pressing issues after each paper, then feel free to raise them. A gentleman at the back had a question. Please, no, I may ask you to return to it during discussion time if you're so kind. If I could also ask all presenters to be mindful, please, of the time constraints we're under. Otherwise, Dana Hamal here is going to have to get heavy on you. And we have discussants who are eager to share some thoughts before some of them have to leave. Talking of water, this is a long, almost 3-hour session, so if some of you feel the need to use the bathroom or restroom, where you may neither bathe nor rest, they're out to the left there, and you can evacuate and return. So thank you once again, Mukta and Laxmi, for this wonderful paper, and now I'd like to invite Libo to come and give his paper. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I will start by confess that I don't study religion, neither history. So this project is really quite an eye-opening and a challenge to me. If it hadn't been that I worked and studied in Shangri-la region for 4 or 5 years prior to the study, I probably wouldn't have the courage to take the challenge. And also I find it very beneficial to have a lot of people from this project visiting me in the project site, and a lot of interaction during the visit and also afterwards really helped me a lot. So thank you for everyone who helped me. My understanding of everyday religion comes from a book by His Holiness Dalai Lama in a book called Beyond Religion. He says it is possible for anyone to attain a rich spiritual life that cultivate the ethical awareness of the world and the inner value of compassion. He compares that to water that everybody cannot survive without. And also he compares religious life, to the tea that also cannot do without water. But he also cautioned that religion, with its embeddedness in its culture and the traditional teaching, is very important. In other words, it's unimaginable that one attain a spiritual life without embedded culture and the religion. So everyday religion, to me, taken from his teaching, is really the culture of tea and water. So my case, in this fast urbanized area in eastern Himalaya, deal with urbanization and waste, and how the culture of tea and water face that challenge. I wish I have a pointer. This map reflects the land use and land cover in 2011 I took from Google Earth. I want to draw your attention to the yellow circle. I have marked all the sacred or spiritual area, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But also, I want you to pay attention to number 7, which is kind of blue, up to the upper right over there, and that's a reservoir created for this urban area. And number 10 and number 11, number 10 is a quarry for construction needs, harvesting stones. And number 11 is the waste site. And the white circle, the big white circle, is Napa Lake or wetland. It's a Ramsar site. And number 12 is the largest monastery that everybody goes to, which is called Songzhan Monastery. And number 13 is one of the villages in a rural setting, Hamugu village, which I took it as a comparison to the urban sites. And also, please pay attention to the red line. That's the channel, cemented channel, diverting sewage water into the wetland. Once again, two maps comparing 2002 and 2011, the fast development of urbanization. This area in history used to be a multi-ethnic and multi-religious community. People as far as Muslim from northern China traveled with the skill of mining and smelting refinery, and also people from close by, like Nashi and Bai nationality, come with coppersmith skill, wood carving skills, blacksmith skills. They joined in this area and created a post, an important post for tea and horse trade business. The little picture down here shows a picture taken of a family, a Tibetan family. Actually, it's a combination of Tibetan and Muslim family that traveled on the tea and horse route all the way to Calcutta, and they lived in Calcutta for many years. So the yellow circle is the old tea and horse trade post, the old town. We call it Gyao Town. And you see how the urban area has since expanded. This place has, in the recent 20 years, have experienced very dramatic placemaking and naming and renaming. First is their policy of opening to the international tourism in the late 1980s. And also the renaming of Shangri-La in 2004, promotion of tourism with large infrastructures, improving the connectivities. And also the three parallel rivers World Heritage Site. The population of place rose from 200,000 to 600,000, 20,000 to 60,000. And in 2020, they expected to have 100,000 people. But tourism visitation was only below 1 million in 2000, but is now 6 million. Also, I want to highlight that this town was pretty much deserted in the 1980s. The old town in the yellow circle, which project people have visited. It's a deserted town. Half of the population have left at this town to move to the new urban area. And those who have left have to pay for people to stay in their home to take care of their property. But afterwards, the tourism has made this a very popular destination. Everybody wants to get in who want to do business in tourism, as we have experienced, we have witnessed. Here are some pictures of the site. The top central picture shows some of the important sacred sites. There is, at the top, there is a Tibetan monastery, and also at the sort of the mid-level, there is a small temple for Han people's water worshipping. And also at the bottom, you see some water coming out, and that's the traditional water harvesting site for the old town, where they used to have very strict rules for water sharing and maintenance and cleaning. And also this pre-wheel was a recent invention, and it caused a lot of controversy. People believe it's only a fake invention for tourism industries, and others, particularly local, believe when they were established, it went through religious activities, and the scripts were kept inside, therefore it is real for them. Old people particularly visit the sites very often. But this place, as I introduced, is a neighbor to a huge wetland site. It was established a protected area in 1994, became a Ramsar wetland in 2005, but impact of tourism is enormous. The roads surrounding the lake were built, and it had a major impact on natural flow of streams and occurrence of vegetations, and also impact on the black-necked crane, a long-range migratory birds, an endangered species. And also the sewage have been dumped in this place without treating it. Shangri-la above, on the ground, but Stinkila beneath and beyond. And this is really the threat to this area. And also those water is also the water, local people practice water burial. They still do, leave the body in the water, and the water carries them to the wetland. But water burial, in my study, we found that it is a gesture of their final compassion showing to the nature or showing to the world, because the body is going to be the food for the fish. But since the pollution has killed all the fish, this gesture of compassion is no longer valid. And also, it contaminated the underground water. So for a village that we visited called Kersong, there is a huge dilemma and confusion between faith and health. In this site, we find that monastic monks, they are part of everyday religion, not just a foregrounded religion. We consider where they come from. They all come from everyday people's family. They send their boy to the monastery to become monk, and they regularly return home. So they carry a lot of Buddhist teachings and the teaching of ethical awareness and values. And also, they build very intimate relations with villagers. And we find that those villages that have high number of monks tend to be much more harmonious than those that don't. And typically in the urban area, people don't send their boys to the monastery anymore. And also, the monks, the services they provided to everyday people outside of the monastery are quite an everyday activities. They were invited by the villagers to go to the mountains to give special offerings to the mountains where the spirit, they believe where spirit lives. And also they hold ceremony in the mountains on many different occasions. And they take care of the sacred sites. They not only give offering on the site, but also they have special prayer in the monastery. And there are many other services relating to when people give birth or when people pass away and when people hold special activity before they start agriculture season, or they hold also activities when they herd their animals in the mountains. So everyday religion is really a ethics, expression of ethics and codes of conducts. Those are different expressions collected in the village. We compare a village in the wetland and also the old town. We found that the old town only has one old monk, and probably there is no young boy who is willing to replace or be sent to the monastery. Whereas in Hamugu village, the population has increased and they still have monks, and those the picture shows those families that still have the special sites that relates to water, the practice of water spirits, and also the family that has monks. So it seems to me there is a relationship. The closer to urban space, the less willingness in becoming a monk. How do we make sense of that? Everyday religion, in conclusion, is an extension and foundation of former religious institution. There is a mutual services and a cultural contract. They are bind together. And also everyday religion is a code of conduct, expression of ethical awareness and the inner value of compassion. Everyday religion is indigenous knowledge, particularly on grazing and farming, and less in the urban area. Some questions I want to further explore, but I don't have an answer. Particularly for policy relevance, I think there seems to be a high environmental risk and the cost of urbanization on the upper streams or on those highland, much higher than the lowland. And rural communities, they seem to have demonstrated higher sensitivity and stewardship to natural resources through expression of everyday religion. But how to maintain harmony and balance between urban and rural development on upstream of Himalaya is very important. I see there is a high danger if there is a higher, extreme high level of urbanization. Finally, according to the Gaia theory, it seems that we have a conclusion that there is an emergent self-regulation of the earth. But how do we recognize that? I believe everyday religion as part of indigenous knowledge is very important. How do we maintain that sensitivity to resilience signals? If institutions careful and capable of listening to those, probably there is a pathway for us. And further discussion, how the interface of religious meaning making and about water pollution, water purity, and actual impact of water pollution on health be understood or reconciled or mediated. I don't have an answer. This question really troubles me during this research. And its implication to the sustainable development of the place-based, scale-sensitive, resilience-driven, and community-oriented upland. Comparison on the role of everyday religion in sustainability across country of different political systems and varying tolerance to religious expression. Those are the questions we can explore further. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Libo, for this provocative and interesting paper with, as you say, so many avenues to explore. In the interests of staying on the right side of the organizers, I think we're going to have to return to the previous system, which is to not have questions after and hold on to them, do not let them go. But now, moving swiftly on to Mahendra Lama and Roshan Rai. Do you have a presentation? Okay. Thank you. No, of course.
Well, thank you very much. This is a study which we did in two locations in the mountain hill regions in the eastern Himalayas. And we tried to look into the concept of Choko Pani, a kind of it's a very comprehensive term. It amounts to even water not even touched, right? When we have the notion of the practice of Choko Pani, this sometimes it is unpolluted or pure or even sacred water, and we tried to have a kind of a study located in these two beautiful towns in the eastern Himalayas, and see how some kind of an interface, Choko Pani acts as an interface between popular religious practices and need for the conservation of water used for daily purposes. And we find two very interesting things. First is a kind of a trio peculiarity between geographical locations, environmental context, and sociocultural configurations. And this is highlighted to establish a trijunction of topography, nature, and religious. They existed traditionally, actually in oral forms, and later on revived and increasingly practiced in real situation. Choko Pani is a widely demonstrated phenomenon in the hills. The Jhankris, the Nepali sorcerer or the shaman, they go for what you call a holy dip in the nearby village streams whenever they have a very famous Guru Purnima or a festival. The indigenous tribe in that region, Lepchas, have their literature, full of describing how water, nature, society, and their daily and their livelihoods are related. And this is just a kind of a small extracts from one of their very famous works on Pomthing Ramedium. This is about germination, about Jumalvani. He says, we burn incense in golden vessels. We sprinkle holy water for you, O Pomthing Ramadam. Then you have the migrants in the hills, that is basically from Bihar. They also talk about whenever they have their famous Chhat Puja every year, they go and offer their pujas nearby, in the nearby springs and rivers. And the crucial issue, of course, in the entire study is how water stress or water scarcity has impacted upon the quality of Choko Pani itself, one, and how the communities have adapted itself, how the states have reacted to such a situation, and in what way people have again recalled the entire tradition, faith, in order to what you call conserve water, not only water, but in order to further strengthen their practice of Choko Pani. For example, in Darjeeling, some of the practices, they don't do it on a kind of a daily or a monthly basis. Now they do it in an yearly basis, right? And here is the situations where we found in Darjeeling. In fact, we wanted to make this study long time back, but we thought that because we thought that there is a very peculiar situation in Darjeeling where the state has started withdrawing in terms of supplies of drinking water in Darjeeling town. And here you find a very beautiful, blending of three different concepts of everyday religions. The dharma part of it, that is religion. The biswas part of it, that is the faith and belief. And the manu part of it, that is some kind of a obedience or some kind of reference to some unknown beliefs. Right? And we have picked up two geographical locations. One, of course, is Darjeeling in West Bengal, and the other one is Gangtok in Sikkim. And it has very interesting features. They are both biodiversity hotspots, cosmopolitan populations, high population growth rate, high rainfall areas, modern institutions, varieties of development agencies, new religious groups have common and strong elements in issues of environmental sustainability. This is Darjeeling town, and this is Gangtok town, and this is the population status in these two towns. The contrasting feature, of course, is Darjeeling has a long colonial history and gradual induction into the democratic system, well-founded institutions, including oldest municipality, right? And whereas Sikkim, history of absolute monarchy or protectorate status, you know. But again, both locations have Nepali community as majority community. And in water management, it's very interesting. In Darjeeling, as far as water management is concerned, it has completed a full circle. First, it used to be community-centric management, and when there used to be abundant water. Then actually state started intervening and shifted this entire dynamics to more organized scientific, what they call scientific, and centralized sources and water, piped-based water supply, right? And again, the failure of the same state system and inefficient machinery to cope up with the increasing demand and stress on water, it has driven the communities back to the springs once again, to go back to the springs again. And back to the community management, conservation, and sustenance. It's a very full circle as far as Darjeeling is concerned, starting from the communities and going back to the communities. And there's a huge scarcity of water today. It's a massive business today. And Darjeeling has 2 lakes still done in 1910s and 1930s. These are the only 2 lakes which exist today also. Whereas Gangtok relatively is much better off as far as water is concerned. State service providers are very strong there, right? And so our questions in this research is there a relationship between everyday religion and water in Darjeeling and Gangtok? When do the people invoke their religious beliefs vis-a-vis water? Is it only during the scarcity? How have attitudes, uses, and practices of reverence towards Choko Pani changed over the years? How do the sacred and profane uses of water interface with questions of governance, equity, and sustainability in Darjeeling and Gangtok? And the other critical question is why people belonging to diverse faiths come to own a single and common point. That means you have a cosmopolitan character, but when it comes to water, it comes to a common point of belief and invoke just one single religious belief in the fair access and equitable distribution of water. And what are the various symbols of instruments of religious invocations for generating and bringing more water? Some of them are very interesting. We looked into the creative literature done by a large number of writers that side, and we found that it really, everyday religion, water, and society, they are so intrinsically integrated, and how everyday religion religious belief is transformed into a societal practice first, and how it is institutionalized to ensure water and environment security is the questions we have looked into. So what do the communities do is the final questions we have looked into. The most viable for the communities and the cost-effective and acceptable alternative and potent instrument in such a situation will be to recall tradition and cultural roots and reestablish everyday religion practices, reposition faith and belief in the context of water stress management, and use the same in most inclusive possible manner. The communities of Darjeeling and Gangtok have organized, therefore, themselves into samajas, roughly non-governmental societies, and these samajas are tightly constituted geographical units. Samas have members from very many religious and social backgrounds. However, in terms of birth ceremonies, marriages, and funerals, the members of the Samaj adhere to religion and customs of the affected family. It's a very interesting situation, but when it comes to a scarce commodity like water, they have again a common platform. So this has 6 case studies. 6 springs in Darjeeling have been looked into, and 4 springs in Gangtok have been studied. And all these studies very amply indicate that newer alignments and going back to roots are very steadily taking place, and that have become one of the very widely acclaimed practices in these 2 towns of Darjeeling and Gangtok. And the case studies will be further presented by my colleague Roshan. Thank you.
Namaste and good morning. In the discussion that we had with various communities, what emerged is Choko Pani is universal, or water is sacred for everyone, and it is used for various reasons, like whether be offering to God or a cleansing agent, or just like water in itself, you know. And the 2 photographs kind of show like how it is kind of a lived thing, where just 2 random kids in the middle of town bowing down to Mahakal Dada, which is kind of the highest point and the most sacred point in Darjeeling, and the other spring, which is at kind of the lowest point of Darjeeling, where next to the spring you can see the temple as such, which kind of gives it. But also very interestingly, which kind of challenges the whole notion about how things merge and mix up, is the fact that even though if you look at documents as such, everyone says it's Hindu, but in terms of practice, it's a much more diverse mix of oral tradition and Hinduism. But maybe because Hinduism is a predominant thing, you have the textual references to Nag, which was very similar to Nepal. So in that sense, in all the sacred water sources are considered sacred, and there's also the worship of the snakes. And it's also very simplistic to say snakes, but it is actually a level of being where water and the Nag devatas constantly interact, and the 2 go hand in hand and cannot be isolated. The minute you isolate it, then the water source in itself gets removed as such. But I think the challenge is that the profane also exists next to these so-called sacred springs as such. And these are 2 instances of this is Gangtok and this is Darjeeling. And I think quickly to talk about the contradictions that arise, which comes from the perspective of the various discussions we had the communities, is that most of these expressions of everyday religion came out of living close to nature, but with rapid urbanization, this link has been broken up, and you see like 3 references, with one very esoteric talking about the age of downfall and the sacredness is no longer there. The one more from a perspective of how we are excluded from nature, and finally one from whole, like there is a water stress, and so it can't be sacred as such. And looking at the whole notion of Choko Pani and the sacred water or pure water, and analyzing it further, is like the adaptations that I've taken. One Dr. Lama talked about, where various people came and lived in Darjeeling, so they've adapted. So one of them being people from the plains who have the ritual bath before they pray, don't do it anymore because it's cold, and they just find it impossible. And also for the fact that there's not enough water. And also, interestingly, the same community which would require a ritual bath after their funeral now have to take a water tanker along with the funeral procession, because there's no water where the cremation takes place. Also, how adaptations are taking place in the various rituals from an everyday perspective, where the lepchas, we interviewed one particular family where the parents and the son seem to have a tension, and they're no longer able to offer their daily prayers because they don't have a spring anymore in the neighborhood. So they've kind of negotiated a once-a-year prayer where you go down to the river and do that. So it kind of removes what happens on an everyday at a household level to once a year at a further river level. And also how a community where in the time of mourning they have to have Choko Pani to cleanse themselves every day, which then for them comes from running water, is now adapted to water which comes out of a tank but runs through a pipe, and they ritually cleanse themselves, where traditionally they would have to have a spring water or a river water. And so in that also, from a repositioning perspective, it is no longer a common property. It is the Darjeeling discussion always ends up from a perspective of the water mafia, and that is a very accepted term. And even though most people don't speak in Nepali, the discussion happens, and then you always talk about the water mafia. The water sellers. So traditionally, what was a common property where people had various traditions and rituals which allowed people to access water, now are being sold or even captured. And again, Darjeeling is a highly Western influenced community as such. So everyone talks about how water sources have been captured. And also how water sources have, like, from the discussion perspective of access to water, the money and muscle really plays a role, where whether be it from the direct Sinchel perspective, where the people most powerful and have the money get direct access to the Sinchel or the centralized distribution system, or also to various instances where people directly block off a spring water and make it theirs. Darjeeling and Gangtok is a cultural mix, and in Darjeeling, what we kind of found out is that there are community-based organizations that have emerged because a large section of the population came about as migrants from Nepal. So we have around 120 to 160 community-based organizations called samajas. Samajas are geographical entities where people contribute monetarily, and also they support each other in terms of difficult situations, whether and also in ceremonies like marriages and births and deaths. But what we found out is that samajas at the periphery, who are outside of the centralized municipality distribution system of water, have kind of gone and become more proactive and have included water as one of the issues that they deliberate upon, and these samajas emerged post 1930s as a support group of migrant communities. But today, the ones in the periphery are managing their water systems, and in that we found various types of management where the access to the spring could be open to everyone, or primarily to members alone, or partly to everyone and members. So partly, when I say partly to other people, it means like people from outside the membership can go and collect water at night only, and in all the sites that we saw in Darjeeling and Gangtok, these springs which are managed by samajas or community-based organizations had very strong religious symbolism attached to it, and prayers were offered regularly in this in the spring source. And also, what was very interesting was the fact that even though predominantly Hindu in tradition, like members, irrespective of their faith, would respect and join in cleaning up, but also again, the challenge that these spring water sources were facing is that macro issues of waste management and waste disposal was proving a huge threat to these spring sources. So in that sense, one hand, we saw this amazing community response of trying to manage their water resources, distribute it, and even look into conflict management as such. We found one particular spring source where they've hired an old lady so that she is totally in charge of distributing the water, and her views or her decision is accepted by the entire community. And she also has the ability to identify the various members' container, and she allocates water, and then also decides who can then take the water for washing, as in like drinking and washing clothes were separated. Also, we also found one particular community which is now gone so strong in terms of their water distribution that they have actually even devised a sewage system for themselves, and they are actually pressurizing people living above them who are more well off to join their water system or their sewage system because they do not want their water sources to be contaminated. So one hand, we saw these expressions of managing,
which are very directly linked with their religious practices, but also being highly threatened by external or larger macroeconomic or macro systems of waste management. So thank you. That's.
Thank you very much, Mahendra and Roshan, for a wonderful presentation. Now we have Nyimatashi and Yong from the Southwest University for Nationalities.
Thanks to ICI give us the opportunity of making our presentation here. And we are from the Southwest University for Ethnicity, People Republic of China. The topic for our presentation is everyday religion in Kanding, the natural, social, and religious life of water, and the politics of production. Now, in the first part, we will give a sketch about the historical development of the city of Kanding, and the changing between Kang's Dazedo and Han's Darjeeling, because Kanding located at the borderland between the Chinese innerland and the Tibetan area. And in the second part is everyday religion and the water environment in the modern development of the Kanding city. And the third part is a reflective summary about the reason of thirsty modern China, because water problem is also a hot topic in China nowadays, especially for the mass media. And we will talk something about the dramatic changing of relationship between nature and the society, from the reciprocity to rulership. The first part is the historical background about the city of Kanding. Kanding in Tibetan names is called as Dazedo. In its Tibetan meanings, it means that there are two rivers just flowing through the city, the Darchu and the Zerchu, and there are three big mountains surrounded the small city. And in the past times, in the 7th century, they're just, according to some historical record, they're just thousands of people. But nowadays, the Kanding has a population of around 100,000 people there. And someone said, it is the most populous small city in China, even than the Hong Kong, the city of Hong Kong. And someone also said, everything east of Kanding is inhabited primarily by Han Chinese, and everything west of Kanding is predominantly of the Tibetan areas. And also, one of the prominent aspects about the Kanding city is that it is also the tea house trading part between Chinese and Tibetan. In history, Tibetan people exchange horse with Han Chinese tea in the small city. And especially in the middle of the 19th century, in the Qing Empire, the Darjeeling was one of the main trading ports in China, especially for the tea house trading business. But we can see from this picture, the picture on the left side is first the people transport the tea from Ya'an, one Chinese city, the tea production area, to Kanding by human labor. Human labor carried the tea from Ya'an to Kanding. Then people just band this tea and try to put them on the horseback to stay in Kanding, make preparation for several days. Then in the third phase, the tea transportation from Kanding to Tibetan area will be in yak or in horse groups. But because of this special geographic location, Kanding also is a combating zone, conflicting area between the Han Chinese and the Tibetan area in history, especially in the Republican eras. One of the powerful warlord of the Sichuan province called Liu Wenhui, his picture is on the left side. He seized control of this area, and he built up one of the special provinces in China. It's called the Sikkim province. And Kanding was the capital city of the Sikkim province. And there's some picture about which was taken in the 20th and the 13th era. And also some Western adventurers also explored the Kanding city, like Alexander David-Neal, E.H. Wilson, and Shelton, and Joseph Rock. But especially, I mentioned especially about the Shelton. He's a New Yorker. He donated most of his picture about the Kanding city to the Newark Museum of the New Jersey. And in the 1950s, the CCP, China's Communist Party's Liberation Army, just marched into the Kanding city. In the second part, I will talk something about the everyday religion and the water environment in the modern development of Kanding city. The picture shows the urbanization process in the modern development of the city. We can see that there are much more houses built along the river banks of the city of Kandy. And there's a city map of the 1930s and the 2010. In the second part, I will just give a small case study about one of the spring in the city center of the county. It's a spring in the past time. It's a very clean, but nowadays with urbanization, it has been polluted. And now, in the 2010, we went to the city and we found that the spring has been disappeared. The pollution of the Naga spring water and its disappearance in the year of 2000. But unlike the other fieldwork places around the Himalaya region, people talk about the water scarcity. But I mean, one of the prominent problem for the city of Kandy is water abundance. Water abundance can also be a big serious problem for the future development of the city. We can see these flooding pictures. The whole city was submerged in the flood in the year of 1995. And also there caused some casualties. In the 2010, 4 people died in the landslide. But everyday religion and the water offering is a particular phenomenon in the city of Kandy. The religion, I would rather call it as religious pluralism and syncretism in the city of Kandy. But there is a Catholic, Protestant, Tibetan Buddhism, and Chinese Muslim. But I will just give some special talk about Tibetan Buddhism's water offering ceremony. There are different mantras about water offering in the religious ceremony in the Kandy Tibetan Buddhism monasteries. There are 2 Tibetan Buddhism monasteries, Dorjija, Nanmu, and Nanjue Gongba. But we can see from these mantras, in the reciting of the mantra, the water has been turned into tuizi, means secret water, in the Tibetan people's religious ceremony. Nectar, some people translate it as nectar, tuizi. Yong tuizi na chue me do tang, zixin ben na seji chaso. And our group's interview with the monasteries, Dorjija's Kambu and the Kandy city resident, the local Tibetan peoples still kept their water utensil in their ordinary lives. And we will talk in the second part of the second chapter. We will talk something about water cycling and the politics of production. Just like mentioned, the water abundance has become a big problem. It has been called as a water crisis in recent years in China. But we like to talk about the relationship between Tibetan Buddhism view of nature and the discourse of modernization of resource depletion and exhaustion. The natural water was tamed and channeled into different purposes as a water landscape, water plant, sauna and bathing, hydroelectric, and so on. The natural water was also changed into social and religious water in accordance with the economic values, social functions, and the religious meaning. I will show some pictures about how the local people's conception about the water uses. The natural waters has been classified into 2 groups, social water and the religious water. The local people think that the spring water is the cleanest in their daily life, but the river water has become the dirtiest. It cannot be drink in their ordinary lives. But in this picture, I will show the classification of how the natural water has been used in social life. In Kandy cities, the natural water has been developed into 4 different groups. First is industrialized water, hydroelectric water. The second is commercialized water. Some water can be sold in the market. And the third water is a water landscape in tourism. There's some water landscape built up in one of the mountain, secret mountain inside of the Kandy city to attract more tourists. And the third one is drinking water. In the socialized utilization of natural water in the city of Kandy, the natural water has been classified into the 4 different categories. And in our interviews, the local people just expressed their concern about the deterioration of the water quality And they also said that the previous 3 groups of water is cycling outside their daily life, and they think that water is uncontrollable for them. I mean, industrialized water, commercialized water, and tourism water. But for the last group, the domestic water, they think that water is cycling inside their family, and that water is controllable for their daily life. This is a picture about the commercialized water in Kangding. It's called Lava Pool. It's a major tourist attraction in the city of Kangding, and also a hot spring, and also tea house. And also we can see some environmental degradation in the city of Kangding. In the last part, I will talk something about the water conflict in thirsty modern China, from reciprocity to rulership. In ancient Tibetan society, the term of water has been signified with the meaning of the reciprocity of kingship. And this is borrowing from the Tibetologist Tusi. He just point out that in Tibetan ancient kingship, the king's role is to keeping off epidemics, causing the rain to fall, assure fertility. In other words, that maintaining the cosmic and the social order intact and endure working order. And also, in Tibetan calendar, we can see water has a significant role in Tibetan lunar calendar. The year of 2013 is a female water Naga year. And also, as Tibetans are concerned with establishing harmony between themselves and the spirit gods and other sentient beings. And just as the Kathmandu groups mentioned, the Lu and the Naga spirit inhabited inside the water, and people should worship and preserve the water quality. And also, between the water and the people, there is a reciprocity relationship established between human and nature. I mean, but in modern time, we can see that it has been turned into the relationship of rulership. Nowadays in China, people are discussed why tap water has become polluted and expensive. But in our discussion, Kangding gave us a very good example that the water problem in China doesn't lie with the reason is insufficient water resource. Because in Kangding, we can see, Kangding has a very great resource of water, but there are still water problems. We believe that the elevation of water problem in China should be the market economy and the existence of legitimate and protected property rights. The second reason is the water problem. The sustainable development strategy should get more country and nations and ethnic groups involved inside the process. We should get some global superpowers respond to the human concerns for environment and sustainability as understood and expressed by the majority of the world population. And last but not least is we should borrow some experience from the Tibetan Buddhism and other religions, and just to use the local knowledge to help us to raise our consciousness about water protection and sustainable development. And we will get our Kangding group's director to tell us something else about our discovery.
Thank you, everybody. Because my English is not good, so I just several some word to attach to the paper. You know, I think this Kangding case study is, to some extent, is just a case of the Tibetan religion, Tibetan religion life, and Tibetan region environment, sustainable environment. So that is a very complicated topics. Here, I just want to mention some word in order to you understand our case study clearly. Understand me? The first is the tradition Buddhism society. As you know, the Tibetan history and culture impacted by the Buddhism deeply. So even according to the tradition history, the Tibetan history was divided three periods, I think. The first we called Dambangadash, and the second is Dambashida. Now, some Tibetan people, contemporary Tibetan people, use the Dambayanda. That means the third rejuvenation, the Buddhism rejuvenation. So here we found the Buddhism, how to affect the Tibetan people's viewpoint about the history. So I like call the first two periods the Tibetan Buddhism society. In this society, as you know, the ideology is the Buddhism, no problem. And the construction of the society is, on the political level, that is the local Tibetan government and deputy agency of central government and other factors. And on the cultural level, that is Tibetan Buddhism culture. That is the mainstream. And the how to say. So, just this is a tradition. I call tradition Buddhism society. In this society, I think we don't talk about the everyday religion life or sustainable environment. We don't care about that. But the second concept is the contemporary socialism society. As you know, after the last century, 15th, the Tibetan societies changed rapidly. So all the factors of the society exchanged. So that means development also means some problem. I think the everyday religion life and the sustainable environment just one problem among many problems. So according to our case study, we found the religion is not just relationship has something to do with the religion itself. Sometimes it's beyond religion. Also, the environment resource, exploit the environment, natural resource, that's sometimes beyond itself. So I think our project is very important and significant. To some extent, this topics beyond the academic level. That is concerned others, I think, the local government or other levels. So I think maybe we can invite many more people, different kind of work, join our project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professors Nyimatashi and Yong. And now our final presenter, who needs no introduction, comes to you from the New School. Gina.
Okay, well, I want to begin by thanking everyone once again for attending, for coming to join us in these conversations. They're the culmination of so much work. And I really also want to thank my colleagues for their wonderful presentations and also their hard work over the years. The title, as you can see, of my talk is really pushing beyond contradiction and thinking about this nexus between religion and ecology and how everyday religion fits in. And I want to begin by visually posing a question that my colleague, Mark Larimore, asks, and that is, to paraphrase, where does religion live? So I want to take 4 examples. In the first, we have a moment of reverence for the sacred Ganga in my field site of Uttarkashi, India. While few of you have visited this location, features of this image will probably also be familiar to you from textbooks and albums. This story tells a photo, one that we might recognize as religious and even as quote-unquote Hindu. The second image tells a different yet similar story. It is a photo of the goddess Ganga. The sight or darshan of this image is in and of itself a blessing and a religious act for Hindus. What we do not see but can imagine are the practices of devotion to this divine statue and the ritualized worship that is enacted twice daily, if not more, at this temple and at other temples around the world. In the third image, we see again the Ganga, but in this moment it appears to serve a different utility. A man, perhaps a mendicant, perhaps a sadhu, washes clothes on a flat stone in the riverbed. This act and the use of soap in the Ganga is prohibited in numerous Hindu texts. Do we read this image as secular and utilitarian, or as religious and yet irreverent? A final stage setting image is again on the banks of the Ganga. It shows 2 girls enjoying an afternoon off from school, and the crisp spiel of the Ganga playfully splashed upon a friend. Do we see religion here? To the extent that each image captures a moment of practice and landscapes of meaning, symbolism, and divinity, we can argue that these photos piece together an image of everyday religious lives. In this formulation, everyday religion is a guide to understanding not just the exceptional moments of religiosity, when the sacred is ostensibly severed from the profane, but also the in-between spaces. In addition to serving as representations of everyday religion, these images also show us how religious practices can be dependent on a material base, important for human and non-human well-being. The effort to examine this nexus has been taken up by scholars who look between, beyond, and across major world religions, and who approach the topic with a broad and epistemologically inclusive definition of the environment. This work explores the religious dimensions of nature affinities and everyday environmental practices to illuminate the relations of religion and ecology left hidden by a focus on global traditions such as Hinduism. Now, religious scholars will note that the term Hindu is in and of itself highly varied and amorphous. It represents a highly varied and amorphous set of beliefs and practices that have evolved quite greatly over time. And if the study of Hindu faith wasn't complicated enough, it becomes even more so when the question of the environment is added, even though we're bringing nuanced orientations to the environment into the consideration. Even though some Hindu texts urge reverent and environmentally sound behavior, many contemporary practices in relation to sacred natural resources are unsustainable. Pointing to this, some argue that this reveals limits to reliance on religious precepts for the management of resources. The divide between what Hindu texts say and what is practiced seems on the surface to illustrate contradictions, hence the title of the talk. What if, however, the inclination to see religious contradiction in ecological practice is a limitation of our expectations of complete adherence to doctrine? What happens when we remind ourselves that religious ideas and practices have frequently been contested over the course of history, as my colleagues have shown, and that ideas of proper conduct are constantly mediated in new and evolving contexts? If we make that shift, is there a way to turn seeming contradiction into evidence of negotiation, adaptation, and contestation? The choices that people make, moreover, we should also acknowledge, are firmly situated in power-laden struggles that include personal, familial, social, and political terrains. Such choices are continually and dialogically put under scrutiny. Now, with an eye towards expanding upon these debates, I draw from short-term fieldwork conducted in Uttarkashi, a location where I worked on and off for the past 10 years. I also want to note that I worked on the politics of saving Ganga from hydroelectric development in the mountains, and this is actually an opportunity for me to step back from those larger Hindu frames. The capital of a district by the same name, Uttarkashi, is an administrative and commercial hub located near the border of the Tibetan Autonomous Region of China in Uttarakhand state. In the map of Hindu sacred geographies, Uttarkashi is an auspicious place for worship and pilgrimage known as the Tirtha, and it forms a part of the sacred landscape of gods and goddesses known as Dev Bhumi. Devotees of the sacred Ganga and of Lord Shiva travel in large numbers to this mountainous township of 60,000 people. Doesn't quite look like it because this is the southern half of the settlement. And many of them travel even further up to an important temple at Gangotri. Now, peppered as it is with sites of worship along the Ganga, many of the religious acts that one observes appear to fit within the more codified practices that are part of official Hinduism. Even within such a recognizably sacred landscape, however, everyday religion can be located by looking at what people from a range of socioeconomic backgrounds believe they should do versus what they actually do. To ground the study within the complex religious and ecological landscape of Uttakashi, data collection with research assistant Jehari Srivastava involved 20 questionnaires, 10 interviews, and 5 life histories conducted in July of 2012. The most frequent point of inquiry in these exchanges was on people's interactions and relationships with everyday water resources, including the ways that their orientations to water in Uttakashi have changed over time. The questions also inquired people's religious practices to local devtas, or deities named devtas, and their use of water during rites such as morning and evening prayers. Like my colleagues, water was chosen as a focal point because of its everyday dependencies, life-giving qualities, pan-religious symbolism, and resource management challenges. Now, most of the water that's piped, that people consume in Uttakashi is piped through the city, and it comes from a different tributary. So it was impossible to look at a central collection location like the Dungedar of Kathmandu. So what I did instead was we went around and talked to people in their homes and in contexts where they were using water. Compellingly, the responses to the questions that we asked drew attention away from water itself and towards nuanced ways of thinking about human action in sacred land, in the sacred landscape of Uttakashi. This is my focus today. First, a theoretical note. Given the range of responses I documented, it is clear that Uttakashi's past and current resource challenges are multiply interpreted. Efforts to understand the differing responses and seeming contradictions can begin by putting in dialogue the varied perceptions, discourses, and practices in circulation. And this image kind of captures that for me. This approach draws from insights offered by Michal Bakhtin's dialogism. Now, Bakhtin's dialogic approach situates people in time and emphasizes the importance of verbal genres and other media through which senses of self, group, or quote-unquote community are developed. The receiver of these genres does not automatically internalize the voices and words of others, but those influences may offer site for reflection and play, in which one can temporarily try on the thought or perspective of the other. Bakhtin, in other words, insisted that people take active stances to the discourses or texts which they are exposed to, as opposed to being metaphorical recorders and reproducers. Such accounts of dialogism have useful applications to the study of everyday religion. By focusing on moments in which people's values are put into tension and made subject to potential revision, dialogism enables us to delve deeper into the theoretical underpinnings of study in everyday religion. The approach allows us to move beyond a focus on creolization or syncretism and bricolage, with some of the authors that work on everyday religion and lived religion have highlighted in the past. Rather than describing the phenomenon of hybridity, in other words, what deserves more attention are the difficult and contentious processes through which new ideas and practices are adopted. If not, the people of which we speak can appear to be freewheeling agents with the power and the will to adopt and meld ideas as they see fit, rather than people contending with enduring struggles across time, space, and place. Now I'm going to make this part brief, but I also want to highlight that given the definitions of dialogism that I've presented, we can also think about the environment as being dialogically produced. And this is particularly true in contexts such as Uttakashi, as well as other parts of the Himalaya, where the notion of an externalized environment subject to human domination does not necessarily settle with the ways in which people have approached the meaningful resources and landscapes that surround them in daily life. In the sections that follow, dialogism is employed to examine the role of local gods in everyday life and the impact of fluid orientations toward religion and resource management. As mentioned, a number of local gods or devta reside in homes and villages that dot the landscape of this location, and each has their own histories, attributes, and powers. In Uttakashi, the most important god is known as Kandar Devta. He's revered as a protector and guardian of the township. He's also known for his omniscience, his healing powers, and his ability to change fates. He performs these actions by speaking either through one of his attendants or by, when hoisted on the shoulders of two men, by making movements to and fro, which are interpreted in a sort of divine sign language. Now, I argue that Khandar Devta and other Devtas, we have so much for Devta also pictured here, they're important to the discussions of everyday religion and resource management because they're believed to be several Devta with the power to bring rain, which is very important for irrigation. When drought threatens or simply in the hopes of a good rice or wheat crop, devotees gather to their temples, perform ceremonies, and petition for rain. In the urbanizing landscape of Uttarkashi, however, we see that there's the dependence on such devta and the water granting powers are diminishing. This is seen most clearly in the comments of the youth living in the area. An exchange with a grandmother and granddaughter illustrates the generational divides. The two women live in an economically struggling and agrarian-based part of town that's also rapidly developing, and it's a stone throws away from a newly created reservoir. So there's also a very important dam in the middle of Uttarkashi. When we met the grandmother and granddaughter, they were sitting on a rooftop of their two-story home caring for an infant. The conversation followed the script of the questionnaire, beginning with questions about water availability and quantity. Like their neighbors, they used a modest amount of water, maybe 100 liters per day, and they released it into the open drains near their house. When pressed, they conceded that this water likely goes to the river Ganga, and that to compensate, they go upstream where the river runs clean and ask for forgiveness. Now, this runs true with a lot of the literature on pollution in the sacred Ganga. Kelly Alley has worked a lot on that, as has David Haberman, and we can talk about that later as well. As for other sources of water, such as the rains needed for irrigation, the grandmother admitted that she has become too old to partake in such activities, and that the youth seem less inclined to continue the tradition. The granddaughter contested that her generation still believes in the devta, but not as much as people used to. As an example, she asserted that she and her friends go to the temple of various devta, but they don't believe that these gods can bring rain. In her view, water provision is now the role of the government in the same way that it is up to the state to provide education, infrastructure, and health services. She and the other youths I spoke with blamed the growing population for resource management problems and ecological degradation, which they and many others did not find worrisome as of yet, which is very different from the context of water stress and scarcity in places like Darjeeling, for instance. And these youths found the lack of employment, industry, and economic opportunity in the mountains to be much more pressing challenges. The trend towards secularization is also evidenced in the number of people who question the value of visiting Hindu temples altogether. Several interlocutors commented that these have become loci of professional religion or man's religion rather than divine abodes. The blame for this, I was told, has much to do with Uttarkashi's augmented stature in Hindu pilgrimage practices. Residents described how in decades past they could go to the temple with little more than a desire to connect with God and a few small coins and feel at peace. Now, many of the temples in town are major stopping points for Hindus from all over the world. They leave sizable donations, and that is why the priests of the major temples have begun carrying expensive electronic devices, driving around in new all-terrain vehicles, and building costly hotels. This is money that some feel should be used to help others in need. In silent protest, some residents have started to steer away from temples except on major holidays. Instead, they have begun new practices or to revive old ones. A young business owner shared how he sits near the Ganga in the morning rather than visit the temples. To his surprise, he found that he, quote, gets something more, end quote, from this than he does from temple worship. Nature is something else, he said. It is the true source. His new routine perhaps differs from that of his forefathers in that he does not recite mantra or perform ritual at the banks of the Ganga, but instead sits in quiet contemplation. Again, this is a move from more ritualized practices. Now, I'm going to truncate this quite a bit, this section, because of the time, but this is a photo of an interlocutor who I'm calling Manmeet. He's a business owner. Family comes from the Punjab, and he was raised in Garhwal. He's seen the city grow from a small stopping point for trading in the 1960s to the district capital and administrative capital that it is today. He's also a very ardent devotee of this particular devta, Khandar Devta. And he explained his relationship and experiences with this local god in a way that indicated his faith was not felt to be at odds with his college education or disaster response and sanitation work through the Red Cross. Of course, he commented, not everyone believes in the devta, especially not in this modern age of technical advancements when, as he put it, America has reached the moon. He said this was a very common dialogue that he got and criticism from his colleagues. The talk of changing times led to a discussion of environmental degradation. He responded to my questions on religion and resource use by asserting the power of nature to provide its own treatment. If we really want to help nature, he argued, then we need to cooperate with nature. Our duty, for instance, was not to put plastics, waste, and sewage into the river Ganga, but to respect her as Ma or mother. He cautioned, however, that we cannot treat her waters, even if we wanted to. We don't have the power, despite the advances in science. Rather, it is the role of gods and goddesses, the Devi and Devta, to see where nature is imbalanced and to make connections. When the time comes, they balance it, he said, much like the Red Cross. And from time to time, also like the Red Cross, they run awareness programs, sometimes in the form of earthquakes, landslides, and floods, to let people know that balance is needed. These events are telling people to wake up, to be aware, and are reminders of the need for humility in light of the great natural and cosmic forces. And as a matter of fact, my field site was struck by 2 flash floods 2 days after I left, and there's a great need to follow up and see how people are internalizing and responding to that disaster. Manmeet's accounts of nature and the role of gods and forces of change is compelling because it shows how some people look for and interpret dialogic encounters with the divine. In his presentation, the gods are in constant communication with us, whether we seek them out or not, and while it is our duty to adhere to upstanding moral conduct that includes the sound treatment of resources, it is their duty to check and correct imbalances. These may be naturally occurring or are caused by our hubris. This example describes how everyday religion is lived through relationships and encounters with the divine that shapes perceptions of human conduct. And I'm moving to the conclusion here. Ultimately, what the efforts to string together connections between everyday religion and resource management does is focus our gaze on a diverse set of measures for and approaches to the quest for well-being as it is enacted by people contending with the circumstances of everyday life. These values and meanings are employed in this pursuit, and they extend beyond those determined by vernacular and official religion, as well as those originating from scientific or environmental discourse, as Cameron Tonkin-Wise will discuss. The competing values may come from or be embedded in cultural mores and social structures over which people have little conscious control. And yet, as the examples demonstrate, people do make active choices, however guided, in a terrain of normative dispositions, and they exert agency. This agency comes out in moments of dialogue with other humans as well as gods, and it manifests in acts of adaptation, negotiation, and contestation. The decisions that people make are in turn impacted by the flow of resources, native and foreign, that are imbued with symbolic capital and monetary value. As the frequency of exchange of objects, ideas, and religious orientations increases, so does the rate at which people must implicitly or explicitly answer to themselves and to others the question of what they value and why. This is the point of keeping the tension on the table. The answers to these questions are not easy to come by, and they may change from moment to moment. That is why a focus on resource contradiction and religious contradiction and resource management has limited utility. What we see, rather, is how people engage in efforts to live meaningful and upstanding lives in contexts where they are subject to a range of stimuli, influences, and conflicting sources of information. In the process, insights emerge on how and why people are motivated by other concerns, such as employment and opportunities for economic mobility, rather than merely the conservation of resources. Now, in looking forward, further efforts to understand the relationship between everyday religion and resource management will do well to engage the subjective implications of the choices that people make and the ways that their actions tie into notions of self or identity and rapidly changing socioeconomic contexts, which is why we felt that the life history method is so useful, and I think that Mukta and Shova's case really draws that out. This focus will help deter the impulse to praise syncretic practices without due attention to the struggles undergone in the shifting of thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. The work that this implies is a useful step for efforts to examine how environmental projects, programs, and policies could align or be made compatible with ground realities and orientations to the non-human world. Such initiatives can usefully engage the range of beliefs, preoccupations, and hardships that people confront in the everyday while advancing new dialogues about why efforts to support sound resource management strategies are important given the looming ecological crises confronting the Himalaya. Thank you.